Welcome, everybody, to Inside Fabcon 2026. This is another Netrix global webinar talking about the top insights and innovations that you need to know, feedback from the Fabcon conference that was hosted last week. My name is Sean McManus. I'm Field CTO for our Data and AI team, and joined with me today is Adam Morgan. Adam's a senior architect, senior engineer, and data scientist on our delivery team.
Hey, Sean, great to be here.
Thanks, Adam. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the key announcement highlights and takeaways that we have from Fabcon last week, do a little bit of conversational piece, and then talk about how Netrix can help you going forward. So the first big announcement at Fabcon was the database hub in Fabric. And I like this one because it addresses a problem that a lot of our customers see today. And that is that most of them don't have a single database. They have an entire data estate, and that might be composed of Azure SQL database, SQL Server on-prem, maybe some Arc-enabled stuff. And then that could also include things like NoSQL databases like Cosmos DB or Postgres. And so each of these can be managed and monitored and secured in a slightly different manner. And what this database hub is designed to do is to provide a way for you to manage all of that in one place inside Fabric. So instead of bouncing around between tools and depending on which database you're working on, you can get that single view of what you have, how it's performing, and whether or not there are certain issues that you need to care about here. And I think the key importance here is that this is a shift for Microsoft into no longer treating these external databases as upstream systems that the analytics platform like Fabric shouldn't touch, but they're more into pulling those databases into that same platform conversation so that you can utilize your investment in Fabric to do all of that work, from governance to monitoring and AI insights, in addition to all of the ETL work and analytics that you know and love from Fabric. So this is an interesting thing to monitor going forward. It's not GA yet. It's just been announced as early access, but definitely something to follow going forward. Adam, I think I'll let you take this one.
Yes, thanks, Sean. So, one of the announcements that came out of Fabcon 26 that really stood out was the Fabric IQ. And that's one of those features that sounds abstract until you have personally felt the pain it's designed to solve. And Microsoft was very, very direct about the problem. Most AI projects don't fail because the data doesn't exist or for poor planning or things of that nature. They fail because AI doesn't understand the business. It doesn't have context. And we've seen this in multiple clients that have come to us that have from failed projects. The context matters, your approach matters. And it's one of the themes we saw several themes that we'll talk about throughout this webinar. And one of them is, just how much context matters. And we've seen this, and it's not just a technical challenge with AI. Obviously vibe coding has a negative connotation, but that, when you use context, whether you're creating a PowerPoint presentation or a Word doc, or you're just starting a project from scratch and you're starting up, you're creating that structure, the context matters. So in the case of AI in a business problem, you may be trying to perform an AI operation, but if the AI doesn't know which revenue number is the official one, if it doesn't know how a KPI is defined, if it doesn't know a version of the data that people trust, it's going to fail. It's going to come up short. And that's where, AI kind of gets a negative um, connotation at times, is because of those kinds of failures of the person using it. So these are the kinds of challenges that Fabric IQ is designed to fix. Fabric IQ sits on top of your existing Fabric data assets and Power BI semantic models. And turns them into enterprise semantic knowledge, not just metadata. You're getting that much more information and capabilities. In other words, it captures not only where data lives, but what it means. Okay. The semantic layer becomes the shared source of truth that Fabric data agents and copilots rely on, and we'll talk more about those. Instead of each AI experience interpreting the data differently, they're all grounded in that same definitions, logic, and business rules your analysts already use. And that goes, again, it goes back to the context where you've, that key is that grounding that it makes AI so much more efficient. So the real shift here is less guessing, fewer conflicting answers, more confidence in AI-driven asset insights. If Database Hub is about unifying where your data lives, as Sean talked about a minute ago, Fabric IQ is about unifying how your organization understands that data. And that shared understanding is what finally makes agentic AI practical across analytics, operations, and decision making. So maybe the best, just to kind of, put a bow on this is kind of an analogy of, what this does for you. So imagine you're giving someone raw GPS coordinates and asking them to drive across a city. They technically have, most of the data they need. They know the latitude, the longitude, they know the roads exist. They know the destination is somewhere. But what they don't know is which roads are highways versus side streets, which routes are trusted or recommended. What does home or office mean, or avoid tolls? They'll guess sometimes and they'll get there, but sometimes they'll take a terrible route or maybe they won't get there. That's kind of, one of the benefits of Fabric IQ is it's adding that extra information to enrich the AI experience.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think one other point to call out here is you'll see in that graphic the concept of ontology, and that's something that's come up throughout the course of the conference and the various sessions we attended. And really, that term is designed to represent a layer on top of that semantic model that is more of an explanation of how your business operates. And so it's really designed to understand those interactions between departments, those interactions between your various facts in your data estate and things like that that make that intelligence really surface through Fabric IQ. So that's one thing to continue to watch going forward and dig deeper into it because it's really fascinating to see how that can develop going forward.
Absolutely.
So the next thing to talk about here are, what I'm referring to as the other IQs. And really what this slide is about is less about Microsoft announcing a specific um, feature or deliverable and more about them rebranding Microsoft IQ and Work IQ, Foundry IQ, and Fabric IQ as sort of companion products inside their suite of services here. So you can think, Fabric IQ, as Adam did a great job explaining, is that one about the real actionable semantic layer on your data right now that's in Fabric, where Work IQ is more like the direction of Microsoft 365 and Copilot. It's about applying intelligence to everyday work artifacts and workflows. So things like your documents, your meetings, your emails, Teams chats, the way you actually conduct your day-to-day work and how that gets done. And so this is really more of Microsoft talking about, hey, we know Copilot's powerful, but we're going to leverage some of those same principles that we were doing in Fabric IQ in Work IQ to kind of make it even better and more powerful going forward. And then the Foundry IQ is really set to do those same sorts of things around the AI engineering and AI lifecycle side of the story. So think about things like how models and agents are getting built, how they're governed, how they're deployed. And this was more, again, presented as that roadmap and strategy more than a clear general availability feature. So Fabric IQ is the now, and Work IQ plus Foundry IQ are really where this is going with regards to Microsoft and building out that full intelligence stack across all of their data, not just the Fabric stuff.
And I think on this slide, you're seeing two of the themes that we're going to keep hitting on. One is the unification of all the different projects or all the different offerings. But two is the making AI functional instead of just being more of an analytical tool. And talk about that more in the next slide.
Yep.
MCP, a area that is near and dear to my heart. It's one of the most common areas that we get hit on, pinged on for work these days. So this is where Fabric really took a step forward. At Fabcon, Microsoft spent a lot of time on MCP, which if you don't know what that stands for, it stands for the Model Context Protocol. And the reason is simple. MCP is what allows AI to move from advising to acting inside of Fabric. Up until now, most AI experiences have been read-only, back to that analytical approach that I talked about a minute ago. They can answer questions, summarize data, and suggest actions, kind of what you can do in a vanilla chat session, but they can't actually do the work. It's still up to the human to take that information and act on it. And MCP changes that. The Fabric local MCP server, which is now GA, allows AI assistants like Copilot to securely interact with Fabric itself. That includes creating workspaces, managing items, and respecting existing permissions, all without bypassing governance or RBAC. And that's really where, MCP is not new. It's newish, but it's not new in this space. So we've been standing up MCP servers that have even been interacting with Fabric and other relational databases for a while now. At times it's for reporting, at times it's for alerts and things of that nature. And to do that, we had to kind of roll our own. We had to, we usually would go into and make stand it up inside of a container app, and which is fine. So they're not actually introducing any new functionality with this local MCP server. What they're giving us is the ability to put it in a place where it can have all of the security. Because one of the things when we've been deploying them, rolling our own essentially, is that you've still got all your security work to do in front of you. And even if you do that, even if you give it basic authentication and things of that nature, you're not giving it RBAC or the kinds of governance that you're going to get in M365. So that's the real gain with this addition of this MCP server within Fabric. Microsoft also announced the Fabric Remote MCP server. This is the cloud-hosted execution environment designed for running AI agents and automations inside at enterprise scale. Okay, it's about making agent execution reliable, auditable, and governed. Which again, if you're hosting your own MCP server, you're not getting those things unless you built them. And if you built them, you're not doing as good a job as what's going to be out of the box here. They then set MCP directly into Fabric CLI, effectively turning the CLI into an execution layer for agents. This bridges human-driven DevOps with AI-driven operations. So the same tooling works whether the action is initiated by a person or an agent. We've been standing up these for clients as container apps, as I said a minute ago. They scale, but you're still responsible for everything else. So this is a really big gain by Microsoft by adding this functionality.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that. And this one here, One Lake and data state unification, this is really one of the more practical announcements from Fabcon, and it really hits everyone because they have that pain with all of their data being in disparate sources. And how do we take that time to move all of this data into a unified platform? And so essentially what Microsoft is doing here is they're saying, hey, like stop just copying your data. Let's just analyze it. And so the expansion of mirroring is really all about um, making it easier to get your data into Fabric so you can spend more time acting upon it, more time transforming and aggregating it, and less time doing some of those high level tasks of just getting that data in. So right now they've added more sources that you can mirror into OneLake. Oracle, SAP, DataSphere are now GA. SharePoint lists is in preview. And Snowflake also got some additional stronger operational capabilities around mirroring. Furthermore, Microsoft has also called out new preview paths for Azure Monitor and Dremio as well. So these are really fitting in with Microsoft's plan to make OneLake and data state unification universal, no matter what your particular data sources are. And another thing, there are two additional features that are making this even more practical and not just a cool concept, and that's the shortcut transformations, which are now GA, and enhanced operational features. Essentially, that shortcut transformations is really a big one. So when you would set up a shortcut, It's just giving you a pointer to your data. So you may have that pointer to your Azure Data Lake storage. That Azure Data Lake storage might have a bunch of Excel files or CSV files in there. What this allows now, the shortcut transformations, it just allows you to apply transformations right on top of that linked data. So you can standardize and shape and prepare it without having to create another physical copy and another pipeline to manage going forward. So that's just another way to make that process more efficient. And then there's
Yeah.
the change. Go ahead. Do you have something to say about that one? Something to add?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. One of the things that came up in that also, there were a couple other gains in that area. One is that they can also make these pointers dynamic. They're no longer static. So when you set up a shortcut in today's world, it was a static pointer to something. So I just wanted to add that they added in that functionality as part of the pointers as well.
Awesome. Yeah, great call out, Adam. And then change data feed here. That's another piece. You know, when in the previous world, when you would be doing mirroring, you know that you have that latest updated data in Fabric, but you don't always know, well, what's that change record? What's happened since maybe the last time, or what, you know, what's changed since yesterday? And so what change data feed does is expose all of that change information so that your downstream processes can update it incrementally instead of reprocessing it. So think of how powerful that is when combined with mirroring. That really makes those incremental updates more efficient and more useful, taking away some of that downtime, taking away some of the compute that is necessary to bring that data from your beginning to end. So it's essentially allowing you to mature into something more that can run at scale. So easier data to ingest, easier to transform, and more efficient end-to-end processing of all of your data flows here. And again, we're gonna talk about this a little bit more in the conversation here. The unifying theme there as well, with bringing in sources that were previously limited to initially those Microsoft world type sources like Azure SQL Server and things like that, but now they're expanding that beyond the Microsoft ecosystem. So that's pretty exciting.
And we heard the word mirroring a lot, and I know you used it a lot while discussing this area. It trips me up a little bit the first few times I heard it. For those of you that have been around a while, mirroring is essentially federation. When I heard mirroring, I thought, well, maybe the data is being copied. That's not the case. It's a federated. When they expose the data from one platform to another, it's federation. So if you use that word, just think of it that way.
Thanks, Adam. And a few bonus announcements here. I'll let Adam take care of this one as well.
Yeah, this slide's a good reminder that Fabcon wasn't just about big AI concepts. It was also about making Fabric ready for day-to-day enterprise reality. On the DevOps and developer experience slide, Microsoft showed meaningful improvements to the Fabric CLI, including expanded scenarios and better overall developer experience. Most importantly, CI/CD deployments can now be executed directly from the CLI, making workspace deployment a single, repeatable command instead of a manual process. Git integration also continues to mature with support for branded workspaces, selective branching, and code diffs. I know we've been asking for that for a long time. The message here was clear. Fabric is aligning more closely with how modern data and software teams already work. So we've been working with Fabric, gosh, I think before it went GA, and this is one of the areas where, if you ask anybody that's worked with Fabric at all, where's the area that it really needs improvement? It's here. We would go and we'd make a really nice Fabric solution for our clients and set up a nice pipeline, and then we go to work with their technical team to show them how to use it. And the response was always just kind of a blank stare, and that's really how it works. So Microsoft acknowledged that this was, not ready for prime time. And while it's still, ways away from what you'd like it to be, if you're, used to working in a regular software development environment, it's where, you're using, Git for your source control and using command line, and you've full control over your branching strategies and promotions and things of that nature. you're still a long way from a ways from that, but what they showed us at Fabcon last week is a really a big step forward in this area. Um, so yeah, and the other side of that is CLI, using CLI to assist in the deployment of these artifacts. Now, if you're reading this, so it's kind of like how CI/CD is a step forward, but maybe not as much of a step forward as you'd hoped. The CLI is kind of the same thing, where yeah, it would be extremely useful to be able to create some artifacts in the environments um, via code. But this is not infrastructure as code. Make no mistakes about it. It's a big step forward, but this is not a replacement for Terraform or anything of that nature. You're still going to be able to create a few things by code, but you're still going to be creating most things by hand at this point. So we're going to keep an eye on that going forward to see what improvements they have in the future. From a governance and security perspective, this slide quietly contains some of the most important announcements that we heard last week. Workspace tags are now GA, which sounds small, but it's foundational for cost management. And it makes sense, right? I mean, everywhere else in Azure, we're used to having tags to help us identify billing. That hadn't been the case in Fabric. Same with policy enforcement and ownership. Tags definitely going to help with all that. At the same time, Microsoft is expanding Purview's reach into Fabric with DLP policies for OneLake, structured data, insider risk management enhancements, and DSPM specifically designed for AI workloads.
Yeah,
This
and
is
I
Microsoft acknowledging that AI and analytics governance can't be bolted on later. It has to be native. It's got to be baked in. Going back to the MCP talk we had a second ago, that this is the benefit of having these things baked into the platform and not added on later.
Yeah, and
On
it's
the AI,
really a recognition of where Microsoft sees this going as more than just analytics. All of those additional AI capabilities that we talked about, you do not want to be implementing that without the strong governance and security structure underneath. So this is really good news to see all of these additions added to.
Great, yes, absolutely. On the AI front, Copilot and data agents continue to expand in preview, reinforcing the direction we've talked about through this webinar. Fabric is um, being built in an AI-first data platform. It's not just about the analytics tool sets. So that message that we keep hammering home over and over again, and it's not about the analytics and the reporting. It's about making it functional and bringing that functionality to the platform so you don't have to add it on later. And finally, Power BI task flow is reaching GA. Great news there. It's another big signal that Microsoft wants analytics to live inside real business processes, um, not just dashboards. Insights aren't the finish line anymore. The action is.
Yeah, so allowing for dashboards to have real actionable tasks that are attached to them and not just a view only is going to be pretty interesting to follow this going forward. I'm going to be excited to see how this develops. So those are really our highlights in terms of what we saw for announcements. Now, the next section of this, we're going to just have a brief conversation on what we saw as the big highlights and takeaways from the conference. So, Adam, I'll start with you. This is your first Fabcon. What did you think of Atlanta? What did you think of the site and the location and how the conference was presented to all of us?
It was a great experience, from front to back, from the city of Atlanta, everything that they do, how from the airport, going through a tough time, to going through a tough time, organization of the conference itself, to the sessions. I think that's one thing that stood out is some of the sessions were, even the more technical ones were a little more still overviews. If I had maybe, I don't want to say complaints that, would have been nice to go deeper in those. But on the Monday and Tuesday labs, you did have an opportunity to go deeper. And I think anytime you go to a conference like this, the expectation is that you're going to take what you learn from there, and all the materials that you're given and the knowledge that you're given, and that you're going to take it and run with it. So from that perspective, my toolbox was full, and the list of things that I wanted to dive into. On the plane ride home, I was diving into the things it really, anytime you go to one of these conferences and they're well done, you can't help but be energized by what you heard. And you really, you saw a lot of smiling faces. You saw a lot of excited people. And I can tell you that's not the case at every conference. So from that perspective, the value is definitely there.
So this was their first combined conference with SequelCon, and in fact, it was the first instance of SequelCon. And so I think it was really their recognition that Fabric doesn't exist in a vacuum, and that most people that are out there in that SQL world will want to get exposure to how they can leverage Fabric going forward, and probably Microsoft's investment that, hey, we want SQL to be something that is a companion to Fabric. And so that was interesting. I think they said there were over 8,000 attendees, which pretty interesting. We filled up about three-quarters of the lower bowl in the State Farm Arena during the opening keynote. So that was pretty interesting just to see everybody there in one place, listening to some of those high early announcements. That was very exciting.
Yeah,
Adam and Smart, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, going back to the theme of that we've been talking about unification. It's great to see people from all over the world, but it was great to see, as you said, people from all over the IT landscape. There was a heavy Databricks presence there. We saw other vendors there. We saw IBM there. So you really do see, this kind of inclusion both on many different levels. It's not just the all the tools playing together now, and there being less barriers between them, but you're seeing all these technologies being able to come together now.
Yeah, that's really was one of my highlights and big takeaways here. And I noticed it a little bit last year, but it seemed even more prevalent this year. And that was that concept that Microsoft wants to play well with others. They're not looking at their development stack in a silo anymore. So, if you have your data in Snowflake and you don't want to migrate away from Snowflake, we can still leverage that. We can still pull data from Snowflake in. We can use mirroring. We can do all of those things with Snowflake data, rather than seeing that as a barrier. They saw it as an opportunity. Same thing with Databricks. If you want to be leveraging Databricks for writing your ETL and doing the hardcore engineering work on your data platform, you can do that still in Fabric. You don't have to have a completely separate instance there and have that separate from Fabric. And then IBM, that was a surprising one for me to see them there and having a little bit of a presence, because you just don't think of IBM as playing well in this space. So to see Microsoft reaching out to IBM and having some sort of partnership there was pretty interesting as well. The other thing that I took away from this is sort of that expansion of Fabric beyond more than just analytics and beyond more than just data. So the AI pervasiveness in that product was amazing to see. And that's not just using AI and creating AI agents on top of your data. It was demos on how you can create dashboards using AI, how you can create entire Fabric workspaces and instances with all of the artifacts using AI. It's really that complete integration of AI into the entire tooling that I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, and we've talked about it in this webinar, the kind of the progression of AI. At first it was just reporting and analytics, and then, you could use tools to make AI. And now we've gotten to the point where you're using AI to make the tools that are, now being used. So yes, so it's really just this progression of AI, and it all comes back to context and the grounding, as we talked about earlier. But yeah, just to see, especially you mentioned that the ability to create dashboards and things of that nature using AI, it's just making you that much more efficient to deliver your applications. Now that they've embedded all this tooling inside of these platforms.
Yeah, for sure. So, thinking ahead, Adam, to 2026, the rest of 2026, early 2027, where are you most interested in seeing where future developments go, or how we can be leveraging some of the announcements we heard this week or last week, going forward with our customers?
I think a lot of it's the efficiency that's going to be gained in things that used to have to be done by hand earlier. Anything from, as we've talked about, creating workspaces, but just to be able to create dashboards. But then, we obviously we do a lot of integrations, and as you said a minute ago, the you know the, you were we've been pretty much limited in terms of the integrations that we've been able to perform. You pretty much had to ingest the data. A lot of times it's trying to figure out,
Hmm.
hey, does it have an API? Actually, we fight that battle all the time with different third parties. But now the ability to not have to drag around data and to be able to federate it slash mirror, as you laid out a minute ago, I think that's just going to be a huge, huge advancement in the next year. In terms of bringing data together.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, the idea that we can be more efficient if we can propose and write projects for our customers and be able to be more efficient at that, that's going to bring down their costs and that's going to make these types of solutions more attractive for companies that are, potentially on the fence and looking at options for data aggregation. If we can do it more efficiently with Fabric, if we can do it with all of these extra capabilities, it's really going to make our job easier to sell the product in that platform.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Adam, great joining you. Thank you for joining
Yeah.
us today. And going forward, like to just call out that if you have interest in any of these areas, if you could use some help from Netrix, we do a number of these particular offerings. We do fabric assessments. We do data platform MVPs. We can help with data strategy. And then if you're beyond some of that and you're interested in larger enterprise data warehouse assistance, we're able to help in that space. And then going forward, and this is Adam's particular bread and butter, the AI and machine learning space. He loves to dig into that. So, we have customers that are leveraging Fabric and AI machine learning for comprehensive solutions. And we can also help on sort of the analytics side here with Power BI dashboard design, and then additionally process automation. So these are some of the areas that we play in with regard to Fabric and the data space. If you're interested in any of these, feel free to reach out. You can always contact us here through the info@netrixglobal.com email address, and we'd be happy to jump on a call and talk about some options going forward for you. So thank you for taking your time to listen to us today, and we'll see you around the bend. Thanks a lot, everybody.